About a year and a half ago, I secretly bought a horse trough. It was the reset button that I needed, and it was the first time that I realized that I could feel different, like dramatically different. And when you think about all the other things that you can do from a biohacking perspective or from an alternative wellness perspective, and immediately see and feel the results of it, tuning into your best self, it's that higher version of you that was like there all along. You just couldn't let it fully come into form until you moved out the other pieces.
You could have given up, but you didn't. You could have stopped believing, but you didn't. You could have kept living their expectations, but you decided to make this life your own. And in turn, you're here. Hello, everyone. Today we're meeting Kris Rice. She is a founder and CEO of ChillPod, biohacker and expert in wellness and holistic health. Hello, Kris. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Thank you. So let's start our conversation by diving into your personal journey. What was the pivotal moment in your life when you realized that this is something is of passion of yours and you want to dedicate your life towards bringing that to other people?
That's a great question. It happened a couple of years ago, but it was a slow build to that point. So I have two daughters. They're a tween and a teen now. So when they
Mhm.
were younger, much younger, we had a lot of mental health struggles. And as a mom, I really stepped into that role of advocating for my daughter and helping her feel better and find wellness in her life. And as I was really pouring myself entirely into her needs, I was realizing my own needs to really find ways to help myself feel better, to ease my anxiety, to bring myself out of fight or flight that I seem to be in all day long every day, and I didn't even realize it. And so
Right.
in really being by her side, I realized I found a lot of things that were working for me, whether that was meditation or movement or all of the holistic practices that you can look at. But the reality was they took a really long time, and my time was getting shorter and shorter. And so a couple years ago, I had a friend who said, I really think you need to try cold plunging. And I was like,
Mhm.
thanks for the idea. That sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. And so I just put it on the shelf and I was like, maybe sometime. And she kept coming back to me and being like, you should really try it. I really think it's going to help you. And so finally, about a year and a half ago, I secretly bought a horse trough. I put it in our
Mm.
backyard. I made my own ice. I filled it with hose water, and I was hooked from the first one.
Wow.
It was the reset button that I needed. And it was the first time that I realized that I could feel different, like dramatically different. And so that really set everything else in motion and has lit this passion within me to really try and help, especially women, experience cold water, because it's not about liking cold water. No one, myself included, actually likes it. But if we can be intrigued by how we could feel or remember how we can feel afterwards, that's what motivates us to really continue to make this a practice and make it a part of our lives.
This is beautiful. And that discovery of your own health and wellness in the end brought you to that simple solution that you perhaps overlooked and you were even suggested by your friends. But until you tried yourself and you knew how you're supposed to feel
Mhm.
when you are in a well health and wellness, so that's something that really inspired you and motivated you to create such a product that would be helpful for others as well. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, as I was sitting in a Rubbermaid horse trough, I was like, well, one, I am astounded by the results I get, even just from having this moderate temperature water, right? But then I also, my entrepreneurial mind just kept going
Mhm.
back to, but how do we make this better? How do I make this easier? Because it takes a ton of time. You'd be surprised actually how much time and energy it takes
Yeah.
to get the water really cold, especially in the summer, to keep it clean, all of those things. And I kept thinking, like, if I could do this, what would I do? And it was really from that like sense of curiosity and imagination that literally the chill pod was born.
Wow. Yeah. And before we go into what ChillPod gives in terms of, bringing to that state of being, I would say,
Yeah.
I want to go over the benefits of cold plunging. So
Yeah.
I know you're an expert in cold plunging and you now created the product. So what was the main pillars that you stand upon as a company in terms of your vision and in terms of the benefits that it will bring to people that once they start using it? And also, if you can comment on how long on average you've seen the results being felt in their body, so
Yeah.
they can give it enough time to see the result, not thinking about overnight difference.
So the thing that's, I think, the most incredible to me about cold therapy is that you actually do feel that reset. You feel that transformation instantly. And when you think about all the other things that you can do from a biohacking perspective or from an alternative wellness perspective, they take time. There are very few things that you can do it and immediately see and feel the results of it. And I'm not overselling it. Like, I promise you, I'm saying this from a real life perspective of you can go in the tub and feel one way and walk out 2 minutes later and feel entirely different. And so I think the reason from a science perspective that that happens is because we're forcing our body into fight or flight. So fight or flight is your response to danger, to something bad happening, and your body wanting to flee that. When you're doing that intentionally and then allowing your body to come out of it at a slower pace, that's why you feel that transformation. And it's also why there's so much strength and resilience and mindset behind it, because you're doing it on purpose. You know it's going to be hard. You know it's
Yeah.
not going to be something that is like the most desirable, but you know what it's going to feel like afterwards. And having that as like a pillar, say, of your morning, think how many ways that plays out throughout your day. It actually really transforms how you show up, the decisions you make, all of those. It trickles down into all those areas. So
Mm.
I think that that is such a big part of it. And I was actually talking about this last night with a friend and saying,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you think about like, okay, if you could have a magic pill that would help you balance your hormones,
Mm.
manage your stress, and sleep better, like and
Mhm.
it would have no side effects, what would you take it?
Of
And
course.
most people will be like, of course, right? And like, that's it. That really is the case, that you, number one, you feel the transformation right away. So I think it definitely boosts that encouragement to keep doing it. And
Mm.
then you do feel the effects for longer after that. So one, like from a science perspective, dopamine is your chemical that makes you feel happy, right? Your hormone that makes
Right.
you feel good. And there's lots of ways to seek dopamine. We could like put things in an online cart. We could, go shopping. We could do all of these things. Or if you cold plunge, it actually can increase your dopamine by up to 250%. And that's sustained for a period of time. Now, that's really individual, how long that will be. But I can tell you for myself, I think it builds on itself. So if you do it consistently, you just keep sort of pushing that edge of how long it takes or it lasts. And there's very few things most people, you turn on Instagram, you're getting a dopamine hit and it goes away right away. So you got to keep
Yes.
feeding it. What if you could sustain that for half the day? Like, that's
Mm.
amazing. So
Definitely.
those are the things that we leaned into. And when I was creating the product itself, what was important to me was really the human element of it, because At the end of the day, it's a very human experience. It's a way for you to tap into your intuition and really listen to your body of how long can I be in this water today? What feels right? Not what feels good, but what feels right and doable, and really listening to your own guidance system is so important. So, what we did was make it a human experience in that it actually has a chair in there. I'm sitting cross-legged right now because I always sit
Mm.
cross-legged. So, I built it so if you're kind of a yogi, you're able to do, a very comfortable sitting pose for you. All of those little details, as opposed to laying down in a big rectangular box where your body's not meant to go in fight or flight lying down. When you think of if you were being chased by a bear, you're upright, you're ready to move. And if you're
Mhm.
laying down, you're almost fighting against your body's inclination to go into that state. So we took
Mm.
all of that into account to really make the most holistic and whole body experience that we could make.
Yes, and I see that the design even kind of was built in with the mind of like people feeling comfortable because once you realize it's gonna be ice cold water, it's like
Mhm.
instantaneously in your mind you feel that chill and
Yes.
it's like a resistance for you to
Oh,
even
for
try
sure.
because it's not comfortable to start
Nope.
with.
Nope.
So temperature is number one, but then like you said, the position as well. So at least
Mhm.
if you make our body position more comfortable for us to relax into that experience,
Exactly.
then then the cold water maybe not will look so bad after
Yep.
all, and we can just manage being there. And that's my other question. How long would you suggest to stay into the top? And also, how often we should do it during the week to be
It's a great
consistent?
question. No, those are both great questions. So I also like to just point out that technically, cold plunging or cold exposure is anything from 40 to 60 degrees. So that's a really wide range from like just watching it from afar, maybe on Instagram or something like that.
Yeah,
It's always appears to have like ice on the top of the water and all
right.
of those things. Full transparency, I don't do that. So for me, I'm in usually about the mid 40s is kind of my sweet spot. But you've got that full range and you can play with temperature, you can play with timing of how long you're in there. And so I think the beauty of the practice is being able to really listen to your body of what's right. If anybody hadn't tried it before, I would always encourage someone to start at the highest temperature and stay in a little bit longer. So, maybe you try closer to that 60-degree range and you're trying it for a couple of minutes. And I think you'd probably be surprised how long you can do that for. For context, the first time I did it, I had a little bobbing thermometer in my hose water, and it was like about 60 degrees. And I was able to stay in, I was hoping for like 3 minutes, and I made it for 7. So I think you'd be surprised. Now, the further you
Mm.
go down, in my experience, once I hit under 50 degrees, it changed. Like I definitely had to listen to my body and be like, okay, this is going to be a shorter time frame. But that's just me, and everyone is different. And I think the key is just really giving yourself a lot of playfulness and permission for being like, well, let's try this temperature and this time, and I'm going to listen to my body when I get in there. And if it feels wrong, I'm going to get out. If it feels right, maybe I'll stay a little longer. And you really will get that feel for what works. And just like anything else, it's great to switch it up too. Sometimes I'll play around with, because I can choose my temperature, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to actually knock it down like 3 or 4 degrees, but I'm also going to take about 30 seconds off my time.
Mm.
So those kind of things you can play with. And obviously if it's outside, it's spring here, it's kind of cold and rainy, like that may make it easier or it may make it harder. Again, like a very
Yeah,
individual experience.
definitely. And how many times a week would you do that?
So, one way that I actually read this research on this yesterday, and I thought this was such a great way to think about it. I'm not for all or nothing thinking. So, I don't believe you have to do it every single day. Some people feel best when they do it every day. I'm not one of them. I usually do it about 4, maybe 5 times a week
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it just times out well and I do it. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? I didn't sleep the best last night. I'm going to not do it today. I'm not going to add that stress to my day. But the way what I was reading about yesterday was the idea of aiming for 11 minutes throughout your entire week. And so that way it kind of gives you that framework to be like, well, maybe I'm going to do 4 minutes on this day and 2 minutes on that day and like kind of piece together what's going to work for you. But I liked that way of thinking about it as opposed, so more of like a sum that you're aiming for as opposed to every single day, that rigidity.
Definitely. So at least we can adjust to our own schedule and how it works
Exactly.
for us. Yeah, but a few times a week, I think
Yeah.
it is doable for every
Hmm.
one of us, and we
Yep.
just need to like see what fits best.
Yep.
And also, I want to go over not just physical benefits, which is mostly helps with inflammation in our body, as
Hmm.
we all understand that stress and inflammation, they are correlated, and also it builds up and creates certain tension or even pain in
Hmm.
different organs, or it's stuck in some place that we cannot really do anything about it. But then that inflammation, usually people take care with a medical type of treatment, which releases symptom for a little bit, but it doesn't treat the whole issue.
Yeah.
So that's when we need to kind of like address the cause of it. And I believe the cold water reduces that inflammation in the long term and brings your body to the normal state. And that affects
Hmm.
your state of being, which creates the mental space for you to be more open, creative, and enthusiastic, inspired. Is that something that you've noticed within yourself once you start using it? So like I know you had an anxiety you just mentioned, and stress raising your daughters, and of course that's something that really like presses on you and doesn't give you that inspiration. So did you notice the change in your state of being within, let's say, a month after using it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the two biggest pieces for me are the managing of stress and being able to focus on what actually matters, what needs your attention, and being able to kind of let the other things go. Those two things paired together were the biggest shifts for me. It wasn't something that came supernaturally to me. I would try and do it all. I would try and, always make sure that I was doing every single thing. And that like level of intensity has toned down so much because it's not that I've lost that intensity that I have or that passion that I have. It's just focused now where it actually needs to be instead of like, I almost picture it like a hamster on a wheel before, where I was just spinning and spinning and thinking so much and ruminating on everything. And it's literally like when I get in that water, it's like all of my energy inside and out just gets a reset button and it goes from my toes to my head and I can feel it just clear out. And it did take a little time before I could recognize that I felt or that I was actually behaving differently, that my decision
Mm-hmm.
making and my way of being was different. I think the first initial benefits for me were definitely the dopamine and the reduced cortisol. Like those were very noticeable. I remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm like
Mm-hmm.
smiling so much more. I feel so good. And
Energized.
it was just unexpected to me. I didn't anticipate actually noticing that. And then
Wow.
the cumulative effect is that mental clarity piece is just,
Mm.
it's not to be discounted. Everybody
Wow.
wants reduced inflammation or to be able to have a faster metabolism. And those things are amazing and so good. But what if you could feel like your mind was really clear and focused every day? That's really powerful and allows you to show up completely differently than you might have before. And so I always think of it as like really tuning into your best self. You really, it's that higher version of you that was like there all along. You just couldn't let it fully come into form until you moved out the other pieces.
Yes, definitely. And it's more about what we need to let go more than acquire. And a lot of
Yeah.
times we're not focusing on what really matters to bring us to
Mhm.
that mental space where we can really like make better decisions or be more creative and
Yeah.
follow our passion. And that's what the sweet spot is. And your chill pod comes in handy with that.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. That's so well said.
Yes, definitely. And also, if you could maybe like remember what kind of practices that helped you to become more present in your daily life, because people usually struggle with, like being distracted
Mhm.
by certain aspects or perhaps social media or whatever comes in their way. And
Mhm.
sometimes they don't even know the reasons behind their action and they just like stuck in that loop and they don't feel fulfilled. So for them to really like come back to the present moment and become more mindful of how they feel in their body, start paying attention, start treating themselves in a way that they deserve, really,
Mhm.
because for them to start prioritizing their health, they need to first become aware of that. So, what
Yeah.
helped you to come to this place to start really treating yourself with such reverence and respect that you deserve?
I think it was really from a place of just not knowing what else to do. Honestly, it came from a place of like, not a rock bottom, but a real feeling of like, I can't keep this up. And so that was where I got very into meditation. I love meditation. I think it's amazing. And so I went to a Joe Dispenza meditation retreat.
Mm,
And so I went and did that. And that was, I think, a real turning point for me in really understanding what it meant to be present, to be in the present moment, all of those pieces. And then, so I took that out into my meditation practice that became much deeper after that
right.
experience. And I find that now it sounds wild, but like that same sense of presence is what I have in the cold water too, because it's
Mhm.
really hard to think of anything else but exactly where you are, exactly your body, all of those. Like you're just kind of sucked right into the present moment when you're in that
Mm,
experience. And so I think, again, it's almost like that's a muscle that the more you practice it, the more it trickles out into life. So for me, it started with that act of meditation and being able to recognize the present moment, know what that felt like, being able to go to that place. And then it just became in a different form when I started cold plunging. And I think it just, I liken it to the muscle because the more you do it, the stronger it gets. And you're able to recognize more easily when you've come out of it and when you're wanting to go or when you need or want to go back into that place. And so the more that you do it, the more you recognize it and it just becomes a practice.
wow. So I think the biggest motivation would be for people first to experience and to see how they feel afterwards. And
Mhm.
this is like the main, I would say, like the magnet. What would help you to continue the practice and stay consistent? Because again, at the end of the day, all those are tools and practices, and
Yep.
everything is in help for you to come to that mental clarity and start living your lives differently, to feel
Mhm.
alive, to feel energized, like you mentioned, just a
Mhm.
different quality of life that you will get once you start utilizing different tools and be more intentional of doing that in your daily routine.
Yep. I agree. And, making it a ritual, making it something that is a routine in your life is really where everything changes because it becomes something that you look forward to in a way. And I think that's what I would encourage people to kind of shift their thinking about is the automatic resistance is I hate cold water, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that's fine and respectable. And I understand it. I don't like cold water either. But what if you shifted that to how could you feel different? How could you show up different? And just thinking about those outcomes versus that temporary discomfort. And it really, once you think about that, it just opens up the possibilities for things and allows you to think about it in a different way, to feel like, you know what, maybe I'll try it one time. And I literally would bet that if you try it one time, you'll be like, all right, I might try it another time.
Hmm.
It kind of snowballs from there, but I get the resistance of that first time. And,
Yeah.
it's something that I would never tell anyone, try and force anyone to do by any means. But like, if you're intrigued by seeing if your life could feel different by 2 minutes, there's not a lot of other things you can do that can change it that fast.
Yeah, so the effect is profound, and I would suggest people to give it a try and see for themselves. Again, you can listen all day long, but until you do it at least once, you will have a better understanding and idea because everything we learn is experiential in nature. So you cannot just like listen to it long enough to understand. Real understanding goes through experience. So in the end of the day, it's up to you to give yourself a chance to feel a different way of bringing yourself to that mental clarity space. But again, for like for some people it works, for some doesn't. So it's all individual. But we
Yep.
just want to like share what are available tools and practices that you might not heard of, and maybe now could be something of interest. And for those who would like to go more into detail about the product and how to purchase it, where should they go?
Yeah, definitely. So it's called ChillPod, and you can check it out at thechillpod.co, as well as on Instagram. It is also thechillpod.co. So come on over, check it out. We give a lot of just real life how to cold plunge. What does that look like? Science behind it, all of that good stuff. And you can see what it looks like and dive into the product itself on the website. So I would love to show it to you and reach out if you have any questions.
Definitely, I will also include in the show notes. And as we close today, what would be the final thought for our listeners?
I would really just encourage you to think of what's possible, to lean into like your greatest vision of what a day could feel like, what you could feel like, and let that hold stronger than the resistance to kind of keeping yourself where you are. There's always room for transformation. And when you let go of those reins a little and lean into what feels exciting and possible, it's really incredible what can unfold.
Definitely. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and wisdom. And I hope you enjoy your day.
Thank you so much. I loved this conversation.
Thank you. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, hit the subscribe button and share it with others. Stay tuned.